Hey guys, welcome to Summer in Texas. And so I want to talk about something that's challenging me every day, and that is how to deal with super bright sunlight. Let's roll that intro and we'll get into it. Okay, so I wanted to pick something outside today that was super bright because I deal with this every day of the week in Texas in the summer, and that is dealing with super bright sunlight in my photographs and having to control it to kind of give myself beautiful portraits. So there's kind of three tools that I was thinking that might be fun to share that all have to deal with dealing with a lot of light. The first one is just talking about use of the electronic shutter for super fast shutter speeds. Your Olympus EM1 MKII has a mechanical shutter that goes to 1/8,000th of a second, but your electronic shutter can go much faster than that. So if you want to be out here like on this basketball court behind me and still shoot at 1.2, one great way to do it is to go ahead and use the electronic shutter in your camera. The second thing I want to talk about is controlling the light on your subject. And there's kind of two ways to do that. Number one, you can use a scrim or reflector to block or add light, and you can use a flash. And the reason that you would do that is because you want to add light to your subject so it matches the amount of light in the background. That gives you a lower contrast picture and really can give you the ability to control the amount of light and the look of the light on your subject while still not having a background that's blown out. So I'm going to take a little bit of B-roll here while I shoot some portraits, and then we'll get back in the studio, look at the various solutions that I've got, and talk about how I kind of came up with them. Hey guys, welcome back to the studio. So quick shower, change of clothes, and we're back feeling better now. So we went out to the park to shoot a bunch of images in super bright sunlight. So keep that in mind. We're talking about working in direct, harsh midday sun. There's lots of other solutions and ideas for times when you have more directional light or you have softer light, but this is sort of a worst case scenario. So two quick caveats. I would definitely always be shooting in RAW when I'm working in direct sunlight. I want the most dynamic range I possibly can. And for the same reason, I would be shooting at the lowest ISO that's native to the camera. So in the case of the EM1 MKII, that's ISO 200. There is a low setting, but in the low setting, it's not a true ISO for the camera. And so most people say that you lose a little bit of dynamic range in that case. So use that at your discretion, test it out for yourself. I'm just gonna go ahead and use ISO 200 in these examples. Okay, so the basic tools we have for this this shoot were just the camera. We have a nice fast lens. I have one of the 1.2 primes. I have a flash. I have a reflector diffuser kind of deal, and I have my V8-62.0. So pretty modest equipment. And the last piece we're going to talk about is I have a ND filter. So let's look at some of these photos and talk about how we kind of made them. Okay, so the first image that's up here is just direct light. So what I've done here is turned on the electronic shutter on the camera so that I can go ahead and use f1.2 even in the brightest conditions. This is a shutter speed of 1/10,000th of a second, so that's actually above what the mechanical shutter can do in the camera. And if you can work with your model to kind of face them and pose them and work with them in a way where the natural light, the direct harsh light works, then you can actually make some really gorgeous images. Here is an example from a wedding where I have her in a doorway. The doorway is getting direct light straight on it, and the background, of course, is the room, which goes completely black because I'm exposing for that highlight. Okay, so a lot of the times when we're working in this direct, harsh light, the number one problem we have is when our subjects are facing into the light. It's very squinty, bright, and not very fun to be there. So the next thing that most people do is turn their subjects around and backlight them. And the problem here is you're having to balance a couple of things. If you bring the exposure down far enough to get like the sky to be completely in your dynamic range, and so you're not losing any detail, and you want your subject to have enough light that you can actually see their expressions and deal with that, then there's a balancing act. Because if I make the background as dark as I would like it, Nicholas would be too dark and he'd get noisy if I tried to recover him. If I exposed for Nicholas, then the background would go super bright and it would be blown out. So, I see a lot of photographs taken this way. You can definitely do it. Here is an example of a wedding photograph where I actually made it work for me. Here they're standing in front of a gigantic window. I let the window go completely white and just exposed for them, turned it black and white and made it work. But most of the time, the deal here is that what you would like to do is have some measure of control over the contrast in the scene. You would like to be able to control the background light and the subject light or the subject light so that you can make them a closer match to one another and get both the blue sky and your subject to turn out correctly. But the next thing that people can do that's probably the easiest, cheapest solution is that you can just make a portable cloud. So if you have a scrim, which is just a translucent reflector, you can use that to make a portable cloud, let the sunlight kind of go through the reflector and get some soft light that way. So if I look at this photograph, that's what we're doing here. Here's a quick behind the scenes of that image where the reflector is just casting a nice shadow on him, and then we get nice soft light. And of course Nicholas is a lot happier here because he has some shade and there's no direct light in his face. This is a great look. The number one problem with this look is that if you want to have a full-length portrait, you need to worry about what's happening on the ground in terms of the shadows. So you can see in the behind the scenes here that there's all kinds of shadows and things happening, and so you'd have to find a way to mask that if you're going to use this for full-length portraits. And there's lots of ways to do that depending on the terrain that you have and that kind of thing, but just be aware of it. If you're going to have a half-length portrait, this makes really soft, beautiful, softbox type light. Of course, one caveat here is that you are at the mercy of the direction of the sun. So you see I'm not shooting into the ideal direction here because of where the sun happens to be. Okay, so next step is a really kind of a beginner's sort of way to deal with this. You can flip them back around again. You can turn your flash on, and then you can get sort of a hard light on them, put a lot of flash power on them, and balance the light out. So here in this case here, we've got the Godox V862O firing on about 1/4 power, and it's firing straight onto Nicholas. And in this case, you can see that we had to close the lens down to about f8, and what that did is give us a great deal more depth of field around here. And of course, because the light is pretty harsh, you can see that the shadows on his face are pretty harsh. So you can work with that. You can move the light around. Obviously, you have control over that, and you can make make pretty pictures this way. If all you have is a flash and a trigger and no other tools at your disposal, then you can totally make this work. And I do it all the time. Here's a photograph where I needed to close down to, I wanted that f8, f11 kind of depth of field because I wanted the clouds to have a lot of definition. I didn't want them to be out of focus. And then I fired a light kind of way over camera left here onto just her face by zooming the head in, and that gave me kind of a cool look. So this is definitely a workable scenario, but one thing you have to keep in mind is that you're not going to have most likely soft light on your subject. It's going to be a harder light. Okay, so third solution here, and this is the trickiest one, but also the most fun one. Here we're kind of using a bunch of different tools. I have an ND filter on the front of my lens, and what that's allowing me to do is to go ahead and get an exposure of ISO 200 f1.2 at 1/250th of a second. Then all excess light beyond that is dealt with by the ND filter. And what that means is that I can use my flash in its regular way to give me whatever power setting I want. Then I fired the flash through the diffuser, making it kind of a softbox that gives me soft light. So now I have the best of all worlds. I'm shooting in a way that gives me control over the background light, gives me soft light on my subject. So this is an ND filter on here, and so I just use the ND filter to give me the exposure that I want, which is f1.2, ISO 200 at 1/250th of a second. Okay, the ND filter cuts out light. That allows me to get that exposure, whereas otherwise I might have to be at f8 or f11 at 1/250th of a second at ISO 200. Okay? And then what I did is I took my flash, I put it on about 1/2 power, and then I fired it through my reflector, and that made a softbox. So looking at the image, we have a few great things going on. The background is not blown out, the background is soft, the light on Nicholas is soft, and the whole thing is balanced out. Okay, so this is a really awesome technique for working in super bright conditions, and it's really easy to do with your EM1 Mark II. And so here's the quick behind the scenes of kind of what those things look like. Here we have the reflector being lit up by the flash, and of course he's being backlit, and of course you notice an ND filter on the camera. And then here is an example of a wedding photograph where I've actually taken the flash and I've bounced it off of a neutral colored wall and given myself really soft light on her. And at the same time, of course, I get to keep my f1.2, which gives me a really soft, beautiful background light. So that's my solutions, guys. I hope it helps. I know a lot of us are out there working in really harsh conditions this summer. If you have a couple of tools at your disposal, a flash, a diffuser, reflector, and maybe an ND filter, then you will be able to create some incredible images wherever you go. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thanks, you guys. Talk to you soon.